There are various forms of obscenity that the limerick can take. The best ones, I think, are episcopal or liturgical, as in a vice both obscene and unsavory holds the Bishop of Barking in slavery. With lascivious howls, he deflowers young owls that he lures to an underground aviary. Or there was a young lady of Kew who remarked, as the curate withdrew, "The vicar is quicker and slicker and thicker and longer and stronger than you." There are less hardcore ones, like the Lady of Chichester, whose tits made the saints in their niches stir. One morning at matins, her breast in white satins made the Bishop of Chichester's breeches stir. And then there's the more raw stuff, like the Bishop of Central Japan used to roger himself with a fan. And when taxed with these acts, he replied, "It contracts and expands so much more than a man." Or the Anglican Dean of Hong Kong. The Anglican Dean of Hong Kong had a thing that was 9 inches long, and he thought that the waiters were admiring his gaiters when he went to the loo. He was wrong. That, I'm glad you noticed, that's by W.H. Auden, who did a wonderful, of whom there exists a marvelous collection of unpublished, mainly gay filth. And then there's clean ones. When Gauguin was visiting Fiji, he observed things are different here, e.g. while Tahitian skin calls for tan spread on thin, you can splosh it on here with a squeegee. That's clean, I think you'll agree. A young engine driver called Hunt was given an engine to shunt, saw a runaway truck, by yelling out, "Duck," saved the life of the fellow in front. That's clean too. As opposed to, say, I was told by an oil man who'd known her of a girl from Red Gulch, Arizona, the inside of whose twat was so scorchingly hot that it lit his Corona. That's a dirty one. The great genius of this genre, now that Kingsley Amis and Philip Larkin have passed on and no longer exchange them and refine and polish and lovingly make them fouler and nastier and meaner, is Robert Conquest, who has, I have the honour to say I'm his friend. He keeps the limerick form well burnished and can do it in any number of ways, as dirty as you like, as clean as you like, or as literary as you like. And I thought I'd share with you, those of you who know As You Like It, will remember the 7 Ages of Man speech and the evolutions that the man performs, from being a baby, mewling and puking in his mother's arms, to the lover sighing like furnace, to the soldier seeking the bubble's reputation even in the cannon's mouth. You know it, right? It's quite a long and intricate speech. It can be done in limerick form like this, the 7 Ages. First you have puking and mewling, then very pissed off with your schooling, then fucks, and then fights, and then judging chaps' rights, then sitting in slippers, then drooling.
Give us a Latin one.
Well, you can do, you can build some in.
Wait, don't back out now. You said it, now let's
there was a young fellow named Rex with exceeding small organs of sex. So when charged with exposure, he replied, with composure, "De minimis non curat lex."
Okay, yeah, all right, that's...
There was a young lady from Bruges whose thing was remarkably huge, observed Louis XIV as he lowered her drawers, "Eh bien, après moi, le déluge." Some of you will recognize at least some of it when I say, "'Twas brillig, and the slithy tove stood gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the momraths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the teeth that catch. Beware the jub-jub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the manxome foe he sought. Then rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought, and as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O fragile day, Calloo, Calais, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig in the slithy toves, to Garn Gimble in the wabe, all mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome-raths outgrabe. Voila. I now have to put on my glasses and actually read from Lord Lundy. It's a cautionary verse. Lord Lundy, the superscription says, who was too freely moved to tears and thereby ruined his political career. Lord Lundy, from his earliest years, was far too freely moved to tears. For instance, if his mother said, "Lundy, it's time to go to bed," he bellowed like a little Turk. Or if his father, Lord Dunkirk, said "Hi" in a commanding tone, "Hi, Lundy, leave the cat alone," Lord Lundy, letting go its tail, would raise so terrible a wail as moved his grandpapa the Duke to utter the severe rebuke, "When I, sir, was a little boy, an animal was not a toy." His father's eldest sister, who was married to a parvenu, confided to her husband, "Drat, the miserable peevish brat. Why don't they drown the little beast?" Suggestions which, to say the least, are not what we expect to hear from daughters of an English peer. His grandmamma, his mother's mother, who had some dignity or other, the garter or no matter what, I can't remember all the lot, said, "Oh, that I were brisk and spry, to give him that for which to cry." An empty wish, alas, for she was blind and nearly 93. This verse I can do. The dear old butler thought, but there, I really neither know nor care for what the dear old butler thought. In my opinion, butlers ought to know their place and not to play the old retainer. Night and day, I'm getting tired, and so are you. We'll cut the poem into two. Second canto. It happened to Lord Lundy then, as happens to so many men towards the age of 26, they shoved him into politics, in which profession he commanded the income that his rank demanded. In turn as secretary for India, the colonies, and war. But very soon his friends began to doubt if he were quite the man. Thus, if a member rose to say, as members do from day to day, arising out of that reply, Lord Lundy would begin to cry. A hint at harmless little jobs would shake him with convulsive sobs. While as for revelations, these would simply bring him to his knees and leave him whimpering like a child. It drove his colleagues raving wild. They let him sink from post to post, from 1,500 at the most to 8, and barely 6, and then to be curator of Big Ben. And finally there came a threat to oust him from the cabinet. The Duke, his aged grandsire, bore the shame till he could bear no more. He rallied his declining powers, summoned the youth to Brackley Towers, and bitterly addressed him thus: "Sir, you have disappointed us. We had intended you to be the next Prime Minister but 3. The stocks were sold, the press was squared, the middle class was quite prepared, but as it is, my patience fails. Go out and govern New South Wales." The aged grandsire groaned and died, and heavens how Lord Lundy cried. There's an American-English version of the story of the Fox and the Raven. You remember the Fox and the Raven? The dumb raven that has the cheese and the fox that cheats the bird. Okay, which I think I can still summon from memory. If this fails, I'll be down to Limericks pretty soon. I warn C-SPAN now. But keep Aesop in mind, and here it is. A raven sat upon a tree, and not a word he spoke for. His beak contained a piece of brie, or maybe it was Roquefort. We'll make it any kind you please. At all events, it was a cheese. Beneath the tree's umbrageous limb, a hungry fox sat, smiling. He saw the raven watching him, spoke in tones beguiling. "J'admire," quoth he, "ton beau plumage." The which was simply persiflage. Two things there are, no doubt you know, to which a fox is used. A rooster that is bound to crow, a crow that's bound to roost, and whichsoever he espies, he tells the most unblushing lies. Sweet fowl, he said, I understand you're more than merely natty. I hear you sing to beat the band, and Adelina Patty. Pray render with your golden tongue a bit from Götterdammerung. This subtle speech was aimed to please the bird, and it succeeded. He thought no crow in all the trees could sing as well as he did. In flattery completely doused, he gave the jewel song from Faust. But gravitation's law, of course, as Isaac Newton showed it, exerted on the cheese its force, and elsewhere soon bestowed it. In fact, there is no need to tell what happened when to earth it fell. I blush to add that when the bird took in the situation, he uttered one emphatic word, unfit for publication. The fox was greatly startled, but he only sighed and answered, tut. The moral is, a fox is bound to be a shameless sinner. And also, when the cheese comes round, you know it's after dinner. But what is only known to few, the fox is after dinner too.
Yes.
The Wally Philosophy Department, ladies and Bruces. It's Eric Idle's great performance at the Hollywood Bowl. It's a real honour to be here. It's Kay. Oh, Immanuel Kant was a real pissant who was very seldom stable. Martin Heidegger was a boozy beggar. He could think you under the table. David Hume could outconsume Schopenhauer and Hegel. And Wittgenstein was a beery swine. Wittgenstein was a beery swine who was just as sloshed as Schlegel. There's nothing Nietzsche couldn't teach her about the raising of the wrist. Socrates himself was permanently pissed. John Stuart Mill, of his own free will, on half a pint of shandy, got spectacularly ill. But Plato, they say, could stick it away. Half a crate of whiskey every day. Aristotle was a bugger for the bottle. Thomas Hobbes was a slave to his dram, and René Descartes was pissed as a fart. I drink, therefore I am. Yes, Socrates himself is particularly missed. A lovely little thinker, but a bugger when he's pissed.
There's one poem that absolutely exemplifies this ethos, and which for some reason never dies, I think for many good reasons, is reborn in all generations, and it's Kipling's If, which I'll close on, if I may. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise, if you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat these two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose, and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on, well, there is nothing in you except the will that says, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, and all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the world, and everything that's in it. And what is more, you'll be a man, my son. Yeah. More, there's no point in it. There's only putrefaction and misery underneath. You can't keep digging if you don't disinfect it. And I would say that the stench of disinfectant sprayed on rubble,
the rubble is on top of human remains, is the particular tang, stench, odor of fascism. And we used to, in our movement, in our pages and so on, say we'd give the title anti-fascist to the older comrades, to those who'd suffered and been through it and so on. We never thought, I think, many of us, that how soon we might have to earn this great title of honor for ourselves. Though we were warned. You remember the end of Bertolt Brecht's play Aturo, when the leader steps forward to the front of the stage after Hitler's body has turned to carrion, after all, at last, and says, well, this is the thing that nearly had us mastered, but do not think that that is all, you men, for though we rose up and we beat the bastard, the bitch that bore him is on heat again.
But the elevated Shakespearean note on which I wish to end was this, is with my favorite sonnet. And I'll tell you why it's favorite in a second. You may know the one I mean. It's when in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself, and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. When in this state, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my soul, like lark at break of day arising, quits sullen earth and sings at heaven's gate, for thy sweet love remembered. Such wealth brings that then I scorn to change my state with kings. And I like this sonnet above rubies, not because of the wonderful play on state and king and the political and social subtext, as we've learned to call it, but because of the earlier bit. Marvelous though that subtext is, the earlier, where he's saying, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed. What do we learn from this? There was some guy who Shakespeare envied. He thought, I wish I had this man's talent. I wish I was as good as him. I wish I was as smart. I wish I had his wit. I wish I had his gift. I can't rest until I know who that guy was. I want very, very, very badly to know. Until I know, I can know no rest.
Writing in response to Thomas Love Peacock, who had said that a poet in our time is a semi-barbarian in a civilized community, Percy Bysshe Shelley proclaimed in 1821, and I'm quoting now, that poets are the hierophants of an unapprehended inspiration, the mirrors of the gigantic shadows which futurity casts upon the present, the words which express what they understand not, the trumpets which sing to battle and feel not what they inspire, the influence which is moved not but moves. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world.
So is there anyone, I mean, I know you've taught at the New School, you've taught at Berkeley, and you've worked with students, and is there anyone writing today who you would suggest for young readers here who might have had the same effect on these readers as Owen did for you?
Well, I think they should read Wilfred Owen. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in particular, they should read Dulce et Decorum Est, the poem that first arrested me, right. Which became part of the basis for Benjamin Britten's War Requiem. Right. There's no reason not to read that. I mean, the First World War was as remote to me as it probably is to anyone here when I read it. It will always be not something outside my generation experience, but if you don't know what happened in the First World War, you don't know why we are still in the crisis of civilization to which it led, which is still going on. And the poetry of that war is the specially sensitive register of what a tragedy it was. Mm-hmm. I can, in fact, recite Dulce et Decorum Est, but I don't know if we have time. The problem is that I still usually can't do it without becoming slightly moist, which might be embarrassing all round. But it's absolutely up to you. Anyone who, all right, I will do it.
I think you should.
Why not?
Why not?
Okay. You have to picture the trenches and in the Western Front, and a young lieutenant from the Midlands. This is bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags. We cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, blood-shod. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf, even to the hoots of tired, outstripped 5/9s that dropped behind. Gas. Gas. Quick boys. An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone there was shouting out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime, deep through the dark green panes and thin green light, as under a green sea I watched him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If, in some smothering dream, you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil's, sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not say, with such high zest, to children, ardent for some desperate glory, that old lie, dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori. So.
Thank you.
Which was written by W.H. Auden in August 1968. Auden was very fond of numinous dates as the title, or titles of his poems, or for the titling of poetry. The 1st of September 1939 is considered by some people to be his finest work. This was simply called August 1968, and it goes, the ogre does what ogres can, deeds quite impossible for man, but one prize is beyond his reach. The ogre cannot master speech. About the subjugated plain, amid the vanquished and the slain, the ogre stalks with hands on hips, while drivel gushes from his lips. And August 1968, as some of you will be old enough to remember, was the date of the invasion of Czechoslovakia, of the Red Army crushing of the Czech experiment. And it was penned by Auden as a very immediate response, hot immediate response, from just across the Austrian frontier to that erasure by the Soviet Union of culture and democracy in Czechoslovakia. I happened that month to be in Havana, in Cuba, and was on my way to Prague, and I was very much struck, without registering it, of course, anything like so acutely or memorably, but very much struck by the awful rhetoric and the terminology employed by the defenders of that invasion by the Warsaw Pact, some of whom were in the West. There's a term in French, langue du bois, the wooden tongue, which was coined by nobody knows who to describe particularly thuggish and inept phrases of propaganda. And langue du bois, the wooden tongue, seems to be the perfect appellation still for the name that the occupation regime in Prague and its sponsors eventually gave to the government they installed. They called it a regime of normalization. If you will pause for a second and consider the horror of living under a regime of normalization, you'll, I think, see the distance between that and poetry. And 21 years later, only 21 years later, the mighty occupation authority that had been installed by the full weight of that, I'm sorry to revert again to a foreign tag, but Ernst Fischer, the great Austrian Marxist critic, referred to it as Panzerkommunismus, Panzerkommunism. The full weight of Panzerkommunism that had imposed this regime in Prague collapsed, completely collapsed, amid laughter and ignominy, and collapsed without the loss of a single life or the breaking of a single limb, as a consequence of a civil opposition that was led by satirical playwrights, ironic essayists, Bohemian jazz players, I mean Bohemian in both senses here, Moravian jazz players too, and rock musicians, and subversive poets, and that was all it took.